Welcome back, everyone. This is Ayad Budyab, and we are proceeding with our AngularJS course. As you have seen in the previous video, we have talked about a lot of Angular stuff, and we covered so many details as far as the download and the tools that we need, and what type of what Angular is, and what type of design pattern is based on, and so on. So we talked about all that, and then we said that we will experiment with this as we go through the course and we learn more and more about it and we dig deeper into the details. But for now, in this course, we'll start working with some examples to see how Angular works and just get familiar with the concept and see what functionality it provides to us. Now, when I downloaded Angular, and I showed you the steps in the previous video, I have angular.js as a file somewhere on my machine where I downloaded it, right? Now, in my case, I have all the examples that you see here. For example, download, getting started, and so on. All these examples are in one directory, and that directory has a scripts folder. In that folder, I put the AngularJS file. Okay, so I need to reference that on my machine, in my examples, before I can start using Angular and getting the results that I'm looking for. Now, there are two ways of doing that. I can put the Angular reference here at the bottom of the body of the page so it can load it and work properly, or I can go into the header section and use jQuery, and I say when the DOM is ready, just add AngularJS. Now, I'm not going to use jQuery right now. I don't have plans of using jQuery unless I want to compare it to what Angular is doing and stuff like that, where just Angular and jQuery can be used together to show that we can actually use them together. But other than that, I don't want to refer to jQuery. So that's why I'm not going to reference that on the top. I'm going to put my reference for Angular down here at the bottom of the page. And remember, I put all this in the scripts folder. So I reference script. I will use the source equals. And then in here, remember it's in the scripts folder. And then it's named angular.js. Okay, so this is the actual file that I need to do my work. And closing my tag, and then closing scripts. This is actually script and with lowercase. Okay, so now that I have referenced jQuery on my page, you will see that with the source, and then it is again under the scripts folder. Now, what else do I need? Normally, and you will see again, this is all over the Angular page. I will be using directives. Directives are ways of telling Angular what things that you need. For example, I can use the directive for the model, right? I can use the directive for the actual app to bootstrap Angular and get the page and everything else going. So these are so many different directives that we need to experiment with them one at a time. But for now, and in this example, I'm trying to use the app directive, but all these are preceded with ng for Angular. So ng app, that will be my directive, and I'm going to put that up here in the HTML portion. I can put this ng app over here, and we'll experiment with all these different options later. But right now, I'm going to keep ng app up here in the HTML. So now I have ng app as my directive. Let's think about it this way. If I don't have ng app in my page, the actual Angular expressions that we're trying to use would not work. Okay, so for now let's take it that way. So I have ng app on the top, but remember we're working in here with HTML5, right? So then if I need to use attributes within my tags, I have to precede them with the data text, right? Otherwise, HTML5 will complain that, hey, I don't understand what this attribute mean, right? Not necessarily HTML5, what I'm saying is the browser or basically the tool that you're using would say, I don't know what this tag is, what this attribute is. So for example, if I'm using my code within Visual Studio would underline this and say, I don't understand what that means. Okay, so that's why you might see it written this way, ng app. You might see it written data dash ng app. Okay, it just means the same thing, but in this case, if you have data dash in front of it, now it is standard to HTML5 because all the attributes in HTML5 will be preceded with data dash, especially the ones that normally you don't use within HTML. It's the new attributes that you're introducing, and that's what Angular is right now. It's introducing the ng app as an attribute, and that's why we proceeded with data dash, or we can remove the data dash and simply use ng app. So you might see it both ways. Okay, so that's in the HTML tag. I have the ng app on the top. Now I have the script reference down here. Now what else can I do? Let's say in here, for example, let's write a paragraph. And in this paragraph, I would say, can I do some calculations? Okay, let's put that in a bold tag. Okay, /b. All right, so in this case then, what type of calculations can I make? Let's use the double opening and double closing braces. Okay, so I have opening and closing. As you can see it here, there's two opening, two closing braces. Let's put, let's say, the number 5 in there. Okay, let's go ahead and save, and then let's try to load that in Chrome. Okay, can I do some calculations? The number 5 displays in bold. I'm not doing any calculations yet, but I'm just trying to display the actual page. Let's go back to Sublime Text, and let's say in this case I would do 15 plus 45. Save that, and let's try to reload. And now it says, can I do some calculations? 60. So then what you can see here is that in the double curly braces, the expressions are being evaluated, right? So it evaluates this. It says 15 plus 45, that's 60. It displays 60 on the screen. So these expressions then are being evaluated as I'm creating my work. Okay, so this is just by simply referencing Angular down here and then having the ng app on the top. Okay, now let's do something different in this case. Let's just take this out, okay, and do something else. Let's go ahead and ask the user for some input. Okay, so I'm going to say input, and I'm going to say type equals text, and then I'm going to refer to something in here that has the name, and I'm going to use another directive by saying ng model. And remember what the model is, right? A model represents the data that I need, because Angular is based on the MVC pattern, which is model view controller. The model represents the data. In this case, I'm saying for my ng model, I'm going to use this input as refer to it as the name. Okay, so this is probably the user's name would be typed in this input box, and this is my ng model. Okay, and then down here I'm going to put a paragraph, and let's go ahead and close it. It's in this paragraph I'm going to say welcome to the Angular course. Okay, now you kind of have an idea what I'm talking about in this case, right? I'm going to ask that name to say welcome to the ng course. So if I type my name Ayad, it say welcome Ayad to the ng course, and so on. Well, how can I do this, right? I just kind of referred to that in my previous example. Let's say, for example, I'm going to use the bold tag, but it doesn't have to be bold, by the way. I can say, for example, use the italic right? It doesn't have to be the actual bold tag. But what's important in this case is that I'm going to use my double curly braces to refer to the name. Okay, so open, open, close, close, and then in here I would say name. So what did I do? I created an ng model. I created an input type in here, and then I gave it the ng model to be name. Now I can refer to name anywhere else in my code, and I say welcome name to the Angular course. Okay, so then in this case I have the ng app on the top, right? I have the script reference down here. I ask the user for the to type the text, and then whatever the user type, I'll say welcome name to the Angular course. Let's go ahead and save and see what this one would give us on the screen. So let's put the reference to the page there. It says welcome to the Angular course. I have an input box over here. I type my name, and notice it says down here welcome Ayad to the Angular course. So basically then what happens, it's just binding whatever I get in the text box down here. So as this one changes, this one would change, right? Welcome James to the Angular course. Well, this is changing dynamically by simply saying that I'm referencing that ng model down in my code in here by using the double curly braces to reference to that item. Okay, so there are two things that we start getting familiar with. The first thing is ng app that we put in here on top of the page, and then in here I have ng model within the actual input box to refer to that input box, and I gave it a name. I can use that name somewhere else in my code, and I also made sure that my reference to the AngularJS file is properly set by doing scripts and then angular.js. So this is pretty much how I can get started with it, and that's how we can experiment with the code and see what information that gives us. Now again, there's a lot of things we could learn about these directives and what Angular does by simply going to the Angular page, and then let's start from scratch in here, www.angularjs.org. This is the original page. You see it here, and then there's a lot of things that we can learn about why AngularJS, and then the alternatives, and then there are some videos in here, and then there are some basics that talks about examples, right? You see in here that we're using the ng app that tells AngularJS to be active in this portion of the page, right? So since I tell ng app, hey, bootstrap here or be active in this portion, since I put that in the HTML tag, therefore it's going to be active in the whole page. If I say ng app in the body, it is active in the body. So again, since I put that in the HTML, I'm telling Angular to be active in the whole page. And then in here I have a reference to Angular JS, and I put that in the scripts folder over here by referencing the CDN, but in my case I put it at the bottom of the page. That did the same thing in our example. We reference to an ng model. This links the form and the model, because in this case what's going to happen is I'm going to use that model somewhere else in the page, and it says ng model your name, and notice in here that we're referencing your name as the declarative way of specifying data binding locations. So I'm data binding to that name that I have up here. So there's a lot to experiment with on the Angular page, but the key point that I'm trying to bring to you is that I can always go to the develop on the top and reference API. By looking at the API reference, there's a lot of things that we can talk about. For example, they have the functions here, and then down here we have the directives. Okay, so the directive that I talk about is ng app. Well, okay, I can click on ng app and experiment with it. Here it is. It says use this directive to auto bootstrap an AngularJS application, which is as the previous page has indicated, that I want Angular to be active in this location. Since I put it in the header, therefore I'm in the HTML, I'm sorry, then that will be referenced in the whole page, right? I can reference that in the body and also be available only in the body. And then we'll talk about the rest of as far as controllers and so on. And then this is the ng app, and then we have a lot of ng stuff. We will experiment, for example, with ng init to initialize some data that we can use in the upcoming examples. Again, there's a lot in here to learn, but we're taking it one piece at a time, right? So far then, we are familiar with ng app to bootstrap Angular throughout the page in this case. And then also we get familiar with ng model, so we can indicate a specific name and then reference that name or bind to that name in the rest of the page. So let's look at the other examples of Angular and see how we can work with them. Let's move to the next example. Thank you very much for listening. I'm Ayad Boudiab, and you take care.